At first hearing, the passage read this morning may seem familiar, in style if not in content. It might seem like a list of rules for the early church, or it might remind us of the announcements that Dr. Woosen and his team have been giving us over this past year and a half. We're all familiar with these signs. Signs about COVID, signs about masks, signs about distancing, and about buildings being closed. They are everywhere, and some we hardly need to look at because we've read them so many times. Or maybe these signs you've seen in other places. Or perhaps you've seen signs like this. Do this, don't do that. Be kind, be calm. Try to understand one another without judgment or blame. Although the early church was not facing a pandemic, it was trying to figure out how to be the church in this diverse community of Ephesus. Sherry McConnell gave us a good background about Ephesus last week in her message, and I won't repeat that here, but suffice to say that Ephesus was a city that was as diverse as any metropolitan gathering of a wide assortment of people, then or now, here or anywhere in the world. And it's to this city of Ephesus that this letter was written. Its bold instructions are blatant and direct. There's no flowery language, no gentle prodding here. The results are clear and explicit. It's not about washing our hands or wearing a mask or keeping distant or getting a vaccine as we're used to hearing from our provincial announcements today. This letter is about values and virtues, priorities that reveal a transforming and transformative community who wonders how they might best follow God's way in their world. So what word or phrase or image spoke to you when you heard this passage read? What did you feel as you heard this letter? Did it speak to you as a follower of God's way? Some of us are rule followers. Others feel as though rules are only meant to be broken, while others are somewhere else on the spectrum entirely. Of course, depending on who you ask, some rules make perfect sense. Others seem senseless. And some are just plain wrong, as we're learning more and more each day. I'm sure we can all think of rules that fall into all those categories. Some rules are written. We have to learn them. They're part of the law. Some are more intrinsic. We at Trinity have a community garden here, and as I walk around admiring the variety of things that are grown, I might see, I don't know, a zucchini or a squash or a tomato or a cucumber that looks particularly inviting. And I could just step over and pick that vegetable, but I would never pick it because it doesn't belong to me and it's not my garden. Rules are funny that way, aren't they? So when we hear the ones listed in this reading, we may wonder at the content and why the author chose these ones to mention. It's good to remember that this is just a small piece of the entire letter to that early church community of Ephesus, and we can only imagine what the author was writing about. Maybe people were lying to one another. Maybe there was a lot of angry people around. Maybe there were a few thieves that some thought should be working. And obviously, because it's mentioned a few times, the language between them was not very positive or life-giving. It sounds like these folks kind of needed a mediator. These direct comments give the impression that this community was not as welcoming and as friendly that we might wish for a church community, and that deep divisions had occurred in their gathering, and it was about to explode. So they, like we do on occasion, wrote a letter for some help. This snippet of the letter to the Ephesians, written in response to these fractures, challenges us to imagine what it would be like if we made our decisions based on whether this choice or that choice would bring new life to us and others, whether it would be transforming and transformative, whether it would be following God's way, or the ways of the world. And the author reminds them about forgiveness, about kindness and tender-heartedness, calling them children of God, beloved children of God. Is there a time in your life, at work or at church, in your family or friends, in your neighborhood, that you experienced a time of turmoil and distress and brokenness? Where or who did you turn to for help? Well, reconciliation and relationship has been on the news recently, and not because something is happening far from home, but because something is happening right here. And we have been witness to some horrible facts about the residential schools, the graves that were found, the children that never came home. We might imagine what the letter to our church would contain. We too might be invited and encouraged to be more kind, to be more tender-hearted, to be more forgiving, because we too are children of God, beloved children of God. We all need a little letter now and then. The church in Ephesus did, perhaps we do too. We all need to reach out to others for wisdom and help and guidance and relationship. We all need to be reminded that one, we're not alone, and that as children of God, we are there to share God's love with all we meet. So we may be more forgiving, more kind, more tender-hearted, more justice-seeking, more wise in our community and in our world. May this letter from Ephesus, this tiny bit of a letter from Ephesus, remind us that we too are beloved children of God. Amen.